Welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? It is always remarkable to think of how many people, across so many places and hours of the day, gather here for a shared moment of history and reflection. Tonight, our journey takes us into the world of the Ottoman Empire, an empire vast and complex, stretching across continents, cultures, and centuries. A place of power and splendor, but also of struggle, labor, and lives shaped by forces far greater than themselves. We will move slowly through its rhythms, from the daily realities of ordinary people to the grand lives of rulers, to mysteries still unsolved, and to the contrasts of society that made the empire both fragile and enduring. As you listen, imagine the winding streets of Istanbul at dawn, the call to prayer drifting through the cool air. Picture the crowded markets, the soldiers in barracks, the glittering halls of palaces, and the quiet endurance of farmers working fields that stretched beyond the horizon. We will not rush. This is not history told in headlines and battles, but in textures and rhythms, in the simple details of how people lived, worked, and dreamed. Details that carry us gently into the past and ease us into stillness in the present. So, let us begin with the life of one of the empire's most disciplined and feared groups, the Imagine waking as a Janissary, a soldier of the Sultan's household troops. The barracks stir before dawn. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of wood smoke and leather as men rise from narrow pallets laid out in long rows. The faint light of oil lamps flickers against stone walls, casting shadows that stretch and sway. Your day begins not with choice, but with duty. The Janissaries were not ordinary soldiers. They were elite, bound by strict discipline, their lives shaped entirely by service. Many had been taken as boys through the Devshirme system, gathered from Christian villages in the Balkans and brought to the empire to be raised as Muslims, trained as loyal warriors. For them, and for you in this imagining, childhood was left behind, replaced by the rhythm of barracks, drills, and obedience. The morning brings training. Marching in step, the sound of boots echoing in unison across courtyards. The weight of weapons carried day after day until they became extensions of the body. The bow, the sword, the musket. Each required practice, repetition, and precision. The rhythm of training was relentless, a constant shaping of body and mind to serve the empire. Meals are plain, but steady. A pot of soup, a loaf of bread, shared communally from a great cauldron. The Janissary's kitchen was central to their identity. So much so that rebellions were sometimes signaled by overturning the great cooking cauldrons. This act carried meaning, for food and discipline were inseparable in their lives. Your clothing is uniform. A felt cap, a long robe, boots well worn from drills and campaigns. There is no space for extravagance here, only the sameness of duty, of belonging to a brotherhood bound by order. The day continues with more drills, sometimes hours upon hours of marching, shooting, or swordplay. The sun rises higher, the heat pressing down, sweat soaking into fabric. Still, the rhythm does not break. Discipline is everything. And then there are the moments of stillness. Prayers at appointed times, bodies bowed, voices murmuring in unison. The barracks quiet, filled only with the sound of breath and the distant calls of the city outside. These pauses give rhythm to the day, marking time as surely as the beating of drums. But life as a Janissary is not only routine, there is the ever-present possibility of campaign, marching across mountains and plains, fighting in distant lands. And there is the constant reminder that your life does not fully belong to you. It belongs to the Sultan, to the empire, to the brotherhood that binds you. At night, the barracks fill once more with the quiet hum of voices, the shuffle of boots removed, the faint smell of sweat and smoke lingering in the air. Men settle into their beds, weary from training, some whispering prayers, others simply closing their eyes against the fatigue. Sleep comes not as peace, but as preparation for another day of the same rhythm. Obedience, duty, endurance. To imagine yourself in such a life is to understand why survival was so demanding in the Ottoman world. Not because of constant battle, but because of the unbroken weight of discipline. The endless surrender of self to something larger. And from here, we will turn to a very different kind of life. From the strict barracks of soldiers to the gilded chambers of a ruler who embodied the empire at its height. Our next story will be that of Suleiman the Magnificent. His rise, his rule, and the legacy he left behind. The life of Suleiman the Magnificent from the narrow barracks of the Janissaries. Let us now step into a very different space. Imagine leaving behind the rhythm of drills and the scent of sweat and leather, and instead walking through the towering gates of the Topkapi Palace. Here, marble courtyards stretch out before you, their stone cool underfoot, fountains trickle softly in shaded gardens, and domes rise above chambers filled with silks, carpets, and light filtered through latticed windows. This was the world of Suleiman, remembered as Kanuni, the lawgiver, or, as Europe called him, the Magnificent. Born in 1494, he inherited an empire already vast, yet under his rule it would reach its greatest height. As a boy, Suleiman studied deeply. Tutors guided him through the Quran, through poetry, through languages, law, and strategy. He learned not only to command armies, but also to appreciate art, architecture, and literature. From early on, he was shaped to rule not as a soldier alone, but as a sovereign whose power extended into every part of life. When he ascended to the throne in 1520, the empire was poised for expansion. Its reach stretched across Anatolia, the Balkans, and parts of the Middle East. Yet Suleiman sought more. Under his reign, the Ottoman armies pushed into Hungary, reaching even the gates of Vienna. To the east, they clashed with the Safavid Empire, and to the south, they secured dominance over much of the Arab world, including the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. But conquest was only one part of his legacy. He became known as the lawgiver because he oversaw a systematization of the empire's laws. Imagine scribes bent over parchment, copying decrees, their pens scratching steadily in quiet halls. Suleiman sought to balance the harshness of military power with the structure of justice. Taxes were clarified, property rights outlined, punishments codified. His laws gave order to a realm too vast to be ruled by force alone. And still, he was not only a ruler of laws and armies, he was also a patron of art and architecture. Under his reign, Istanbul became a city of domes and minarets, the skyline reshaped by architects such as Mimar Sinan, whose mosques rose like mountains of stone and light. Within the palace, calligraphers traced verses with steady hands. Jewelers crafted delicate ornaments, and poets recited verses in language rich and flowing. Suleiman's personal life also left its mark. He was deeply connected to Harem Sultan, known in the West as Roxolana. Once a concubine, she rose to become his legal wife, an unusual and powerful position. Her influence reached into politics, diplomacy, and the very structure of the court. Together, they raised children who would shape the succession of the empire, their bond remembered in both admiration and controversy. Imagine Suleiman, late in his reign, seated upon a cushioned throne beneath a dome of intricate patterns. His beard long, his robe heavy with silk and fur, his eyes steady, Around him, courtiers bow, advisors whisper, soldiers stand ready. The weight of empire presses upon his shoulders, yet his presence is calm, composed, measured. He ruled for nearly half a century, guiding the empire through triumphs and trials. When he died in 1566, he left behind a realm at the height of its power, vast in land, diverse in people, and deeply marked by the structures he had shaped. And so, from the discipline of the Janissary barracks to the splendor of Suleiman's court, we see the empire in its breadth, an institution built on order, on law, on conquest, and on culture. But history is never only what is known. It is also what remains hidden, uncertain, and mysterious. And so, in our next step, we will turn from palaces and thrones to secrets buried in the earth and legends whispered across centuries. The mysteries of the Ottoman world that still invite wonder. History is often carried not only in words and deeds, but also in objects. Objects that are preserved, displayed, and sometimes shrouded in layers of reverence and mystery. In the Ottoman Empire, few places embodied this more than the Topkapi Palace, where a collection of sacred relics was gathered, guarded, and displayed to inspire both awe and devotion. Imagine yourself stepping quietly into one of these chambers. The air is cool, heavy with stillness. The light is soft, filtered through latticed windows, falling gently upon glass cases and gilded frames. Attendants move silently, their steps muffled against thick carpets, their voices hushed. Among these relics, there are items of profound significance. The cloak of the Prophet Muhammad, carefully folded and preserved. His sword, its hilt worn smooth by time. A strand of his beard, kept in a reliquary of gold and crystal. And even what is said to be the staff of Moses, leaning in quiet dignity within its case. For centuries, these relics were not simply objects. They were symbols of legitimacy, reinforcing the Sultan's claim as not only ruler of an empire, but also protector of Islam's holiest traditions. When wars were fought, when the empire expanded, the presence of these relics in Topkapi gave the Sultan a mantle of sacred authority. But mysteries linger. How many of these relics are authentic, which have clear histories, and which have been clouded by time, legend, and devotion? Historians and believers often see them differently. For some, their truth lies in faith and continuity. For others, in the records and provenance that remain incomplete. Archaeologists and scholars have long debated their origins. Some trace the journeys of these relics through centuries of conquest and inheritance, from Arabia to Damascus, from Cairo to Istanbul. Others note gaps in the record, moments where objects might have been lost, replaced, or recreated. Yet, even in uncertainty, their presence remains powerful. Imagine standing before them as a visitor centuries ago. You are not alone. Pilgrims and courtiers enter the chamber with reverence. Bowing their heads, some moved to tears, others silent in contemplation. The relics are more than history. They are touchstones of faith, connecting the present to the distant past, offering a sense of continuity across centuries. The room is filled not with noise, but with a hush that carries its own weight. The faint glint of gold frames, the soft shimmer of silk coverings, the smell of incense drifting lightly through the air, all combined to create an atmosphere that is at once intimate and overwhelming. To this day, the relics remain in Topkapi Palace, preserved for visitors from around the world. Some come seeking proof, others seeking connection. Some see in them history, others see faith. The mystery lies not only in their origins, but also in the meaning they continue to carry. And so, as we step out of that quiet chamber, we leave behind the relics and the lingering questions they raise. From the sacred to the worldly, from faith to power, our path now leads us deeper into contrast. For beyond the relics, beyond the palaces, another world existed in the Ottoman Empire, a world of luxury, intrigue, and isolation, hidden within the walls of the Sultan's most private quarters. Next, we will enter the Harem, not the fantasy often imagined, but the real institution, complex and controlled, that shaped the lives of women and the politics of empire. Few aspects of the Ottoman Empire have stirred so much fascination or so much misunderstanding as the Sultan's harem. In stories and legends, it is often painted as a place of indulgence, of endless pleasure, silken draperies, and idle luxury. But the truth was far more intricate, far more human, and far more disciplined than those tales suggest. The harem was not simply a private refuge for the Sultan. It was a carefully structured institution, woven deeply into the fabric of Ottoman politics. It was a world set apart, both sheltered and confined, where women lived lives of privilege and restriction, of comfort and constraint, of intimacy and influence. Imagine entering the harem within the Topkapi Palace. You pass through tall wooden doors bound in iron, guarded by eunuchs whose loyalty and vigilance maintain order. The air changes as you cross the threshold. Cooler, quieter, scented faintly with rosewater and incense. Inside, the corridors wind and bend, their walls covered in bright tiles, deep blues and greens, with geometric patterns that stretch endlessly, repeating like a soft rhythm. Light seeps through narrow, latticed windows, scattering across stone floors and patterned carpets. The sound of footsteps is muffled here, voices lowered as though the walls themselves insist on secrecy. Chambers open into one another, some small and plain, others larger, adorned with cushions, low tables, and hanging lamps of brass. Beyond them lie gardens enclosed by high walls, where orange trees blossom and fountains bubble quietly. Though beautiful, this was not a place of freedom. The women of the harem rarely stepped beyond its confines. At the heart of the harem's hierarchy stood the valid sultan, the sultan's mother. Her authority was unmatched. She directed the life of the harem, oversaw its order, and often extended her influence into the affairs of state. Through her, the private became political, and the domestic world of the palace reached into the empire's highest councils. Beneath her were the concubines, women brought into the palace from across the empire and beyond. Many were of non-Muslim origin, taken from conquered lands or purchased through trade. They were educated, trained in etiquette, in music, in language, in the arts of conversation and refinement. The most favored among them might rise to extraordinary influence, bearing children who could one day rule. Those who bore the Sultan's sons gained the title of Haseki Sultan, carrying both privilege and peril. For the succession of the Ottoman throne was not peaceful or orderly, but often a dangerous contest among brothers. The fortunes of a mother rose or fell with the prospects of her children. Her life might be one of influence at the center of court politics, or one of quiet sorrow if her son Esclame faltered. The women of the harem were attended and guarded by the black eunuchs, men who themselves lived in a world apart, charged with ensuring discipline, privacy, and order. Their chief, the Kisla Aga, was one of the most powerful figures in the Ottoman court, serving as a vital link between the Sultan, his mother, and the women of the harem. Life in the harem unfolded in rhythms that were both tranquil and tense. In the mornings, the sound of soft footsteps echoed through tiled halls as women moved to their lessons. Music floated faintly from chambers where lutes and flutes were played. Others studied languages, poetry, calligraphy, or religious texts. Education was as much a part of their lives as seclusion. Meals were taken in shared spaces. Fragrant stews, fresh bread, fruits, and sweets served on low tables, eaten from delicate dishes of porcelain and silver. The food was rich compared to the rations of soldiers or the meager fare of commoners. Yet dining here was not only nourishment, but ceremony, reinforcing both hierarchy and community. Afternoons might bring embroidery, weaving, or the preparation of garments. Some women tended gardens within the enclosed courtyards, while others engaged in quiet conversation, their words careful, their tones measured. For in this world, even whispers could carry weight, and alliances were often forged in silence. And always there was music, the pluck of strings, the steady rhythm of drums, the soft breath of a reed flute drifting through the chambers like a lullaby. It gave the harem a mood at once calm and restrained, a reminder that life here was as much about waiting as it was about living. To the outside world, the harem was hidden, but within the palace, it was deeply political. The Sultan's companions, his wives, and above all his mother, could shape decisions of war, of diplomacy, of succession. The valid Sultan's council might decide the fate of a vizier. A favored concubine's influence might tilt the balance of power between factions in court. Imagine a quiet chamber at night, lit by the flicker of oil lamps. Behind closed doors, conversations unfold in whispers, not of romance, but of alliances, of sons' futures, of rivals to be outmaneuvered. The harem, though cloistered, was a theatre of influence. Its politics were subtle, its weapons not swords or muskets, but words, gestures, and the currents of favor. The reality versus the fantasy today. Many still imagine the harem as a place of indulgence, of endless leisure, but the reality was a life of constraint, of constant observation, and of ambitions tied to forces beyond one's control. It was a world of beauty, yes, but also of waiting, of uncertainty, and of lives defined by hierarchy. As you picture the corridors of Topkapi, the tiled walls gleaming faintly, the air hushed, and the figures moving softly through its chambers, you may sense how the harem was both sanctuary and cage, a place where luxury and limitation coexisted, and where personal lives intertwined with the currents of empire. From the barracks of soldiers to the throne of Suleiman, from relics of faith to the quiet intrigues of the harem, the Ottoman Empire contained worlds within worlds. And now, as we step beyond those guarded gates, we return to the wider city outside. For beyond palaces and chambers, Istanbul itself was alive. Its streets crowded, its markets filled with voices, its mosques ringing with calls to prayer. Next, we will wander those streets, slowly, as though we ourselves are moving through them, observing the daily rhythms of a bustling Ottoman city. The bustling life of an Ottoman city, the Ottoman Empire, was vast, stretching across 3 continents. Its cities were the heartbeats of that expanse, living, breathing spaces where cultures, languages, and traditions mingled daily. And among them, none was more alive, more layered, or more symbolic of the empire's grandeur than Istanbul. Imagine yourself walking slowly through the city in the early morning. The air is cool, touched with the faint brine of the sea and the distant smoke of fires being lit. You hear, rising gently through the stillness, the sound of the muezzin calling the faithful to prayer. His voice drifts across domes and minarets, echoing between stone walls, rising and falling with calm rhythm. For a moment, the city seems to pause, holding its breath in reverence. Then the streets stir. Merchants roll up the shutters of their shops, calling softly to one another as they arrange wares. The clatter of hooves against cobblestones marks the arrival of donkeys and horses carrying goods from the countryside. Children dart through narrow alleys, carrying baskets, chasing one another until they are called back to chores. The city is alive with sound and movement. Metal hammers ring in the workshops of blacksmiths. The scent of fresh bread drifts from bakeries, mingling with the sharper aroma of spices carried in sacks from distant lands. At the water's edge, fishermen haul in nets, their hands rough, their voices low. Wooden boats creak against the docks, their sails flapping softly in the breeze from the Bosphorus. Step into the Grand Bazaar, a labyrinth of covered stalls and winding corridors. Here, the air is thick with color, scent, and quiet bustle. Rows of merchants display carpets woven in Anatolia, silks from Persia, jewels set in gold. Nearby, piles of dates, figs, almonds, and spices glow in the lamplight. Cinnamon, saffron, pepper, cloves, each filling the air with their own sharp fragrance. Shoppers move slowly, examining, bargaining, pausing to sip sherbet or coffee. The language of trade is universal. Gestures of hands, nods of heads, the subtle push and pull of negotiation. Here, the empire shows its diversity. Turks, Greeks, Armenians, Jews, Arabs, Persians, all mingling, their voices rising in a soft chorus of different tongues. Imagine the feel of a heavy coin passed from hand to hand, its metal warm against the skin, the sound of scales tipping as goods are measured, the rustle of fabrics as they are folded carefully for buyers. The bazaar is not chaotic, but steady, a hum of life repeating day after day, as constant as the tides. The city's rhythm was shaped also by its guilds, associations of craftsmen, each dedicated to a single trade. The tanners, the weavers, the bakers, the candle makers, each had their place in the fabric of urban life. They maintained standards, set prices, and trained apprentices. Imagine the smell of fresh leather in the tanner's quarter, or the glow of candles cooling in neat rows, their wax shining softly. For apprentices, the days were long. From dawn until night, they worked under masters, fetching, carrying, learning through repetition. Their futures depended on years of patience, of discipline, of proving themselves worthy of a craft that would sustain them for life. As the day continues, the city's great mosques draw the faithful again. The courtyards fill slowly with worshippers, their steps echoing across marble floors. Water splashes softly at the fountains where men wash their hands and faces before entering. Inside, the space opens vast and cool, lit by lamps suspended from chains, their flames flickering gently. The voices of prayer rise together, steady and low, filling the dome with a sound both intimate and immense. Beyond Istanbul, the pattern repeats in cities across the empire. In Bursa, Damascus, Cairo, Sarajevo, each with its own rhythm, its own voice, yet all connected by the threads of trade, faith, and empire. As evening falls, the streets quiet once more, shops close, lanterns are lit, casting soft circles of light along narrow alleys. Families gather in homes of stone and wood, sitting close to fires, sharing bread and stews. Children drift into sleep on mats laid out across the floor, while voices murmur low in the night. Outside, the Bosphorus glimmers faintly beneath the moon. Boats rest at anchor, their sails furled, their masts creaking softly in the wind. The city breathes, still alive, but slower now, the rhythm easing into night. To walk through an Ottoman city was to see the empire not in palaces or armies, but in ordinary lives. In the baker kneading dough, in the weaver at his loom, in the fisherman casting nets before dawn. It was here, in these details, that the empire's heart truly beat. And as we leave the city behind, we turn to another rhythm of life. For beyond the noise of markets and the stillness of mosques, the empire stretched into endless countryside, where farmers, shepherds, and villagers lived by the cycles of the land. In our next segment, we will travel outward, into the rural world of the Ottoman Empire, where life was slower, harsher, and entirely bound to the soil. Life in the countryside. Farmers and villagers, the grandeur of Istanbul, with its domes and markets, was only one face of the Ottoman Empire. Beyond the city walls, stretching far into the horizon, lay the countryside, the villages and fields where the majority of people lived. It was here, in the steady rhythm of agricultural life, that the empire's foundation was truly laid. Imagine yourself waking in a small village at dawn. The air is cool and heavy with the scent of earth and livestock. A rooster calls, echoing across the hills, answered by the soft bleating of goats or the low sound of cattle stirring in their pens. Smoke curls upward from chimneys as families light fires for the morning meal. The homes are simple, made of wood or stone, their walls thick to keep in warmth during winter. Roofs of thatch or tile slope gently, while narrow lanes connect each house to the next. The ground is packed dirt, worn by countless footsteps and the wheels of wooden carts. Life here is quiet compared to the city, yet no less demanding, for every day begins early, and every day is shaped by the needs of the land. Farmers rise with the sun, moving into the fields before the heat grows too strong. The soil must be ploughed, seeds planted, weeds pulled, and harvests gathered. Tools are simple: wooden ploughs, iron hoes, sickles that glint faintly in the light. The work is slow, repetitive, and unending. Crops vary with region. In Anatolia, fields of wheat and barley stretch across rolling plains. In the Balkans, vineyards climb the slopes of hills, grapes ripening in the sun. In Egypt, the fertile banks of the Nile yield grain and vegetables, fed by the river's floods. Each harvest sustains not only the villagers themselves, but also the empire. Taxes are collected in grain, in livestock, in coin, carried from villages to storehouses, then to cities, then to armies and palaces. For farmers, the weight of these taxes is constant, their labor feeding not only their families, but the distant machinery of empire. Life in the village is communal. Neighbors share tools, exchange food, and gather for festivals and prayers. Children run barefoot along the lanes, chasing one another, fetching water from wells, learning their roles in the work that awaits them. Women bake bread in clay ovens, their hands moving rhythmically, the scent of fresh loaves filling the air. Others spin wool, weave cloth, or tend animals. Meals are simple but sustaining: flatbread, lentils, yogurt, olives, and, when possible, meat from chickens or sheep. On special days, rice flavored with herbs, or sweets made with honey. Life is not abundant, but it is steady, built on repetition, tradition, and the closeness of community. Religion gives rhythm to the countryside as well. The call to prayer rises not from tall minarets, as in the city, but from smaller village mosques, their voices softer, carried on the wind. Families gather on Fridays, sitting cross-legged on reed mats as the imam delivers his sermon. The words remind them of patience, of humility, of endurance in the face of hardship. Festivals bring moments of brightness. The breaking of the fast at Ramadan, weddings marked by drums and dancing, the sacrifice of animals shared among families. In these moments, the weight of labor eases, replaced by joy, by laughter, by community. But life in the countryside is fragile. The yield of the fields depends on rain, on seasons, on luck. A single drought can wither crops, leaving hunger in its wake. A harsh winter can take livestock, weakening families before the spring. And always, there are taxes to be paid, regardless of the harvest. Disease, too, moves quietly through villages. Illness can strike suddenly, leaving families with fewer hands to work the land. For those who live here, survival is not guaranteed, but earned each day through toil and endurance. As the day ends, farmers return slowly from the fields. Their clothes are dusty, their hands rough, their bodies heavy with fatigue. Children run to meet them, taking tools or carrying baskets of grain. The village settles into evening. Smoke from cooking fires drifts through the air. Voices murmur softly. Lamps glow faintly in doorways. The night is quiet, broken only by the sound of crickets, the barking of dogs, or the distant call of an owl. Families gather close inside their homes, sharing their meal, telling stories, reciting prayers. Sleep comes early. For tomorrow, the work begins again. The same rhythm, repeated endlessly, binding lives to the soil. In these villages, unseen by history's spotlight, the Ottoman Empire endured. It was here, in the fields and farms, in the lives of farmers and shepherds, that the wealth of cities and palaces was truly built. From this rural world, let us shift again. We have seen the soldiers' discipline, the Sultan's splendor, the relics of faith, the intrigue of the harem, the bustle of the city, and the toil of the countryside. Now we will move to the seas. For the empire was not only land, but also water, shaped by fleets, sailors, and the rhythm of waves. In our next segment, we will journey aboard an Ottoman ship to explore life at sea. The life of Ottoman sailors at sea. The Ottoman Empire was not only a land of fields, palaces, and cities. It was also an empire of seas. The Black Sea to the north, the Aegean and Mediterranean to the west, and the Red Sea stretching toward the Indian Ocean. Its ships carried soldiers, traders, pilgrims, and ideas, connecting distant shores beneath the crescent flag. To understand the life of an Ottoman sailor is to step aboard one of these ships and to feel the rhythm of water beneath your feet. Imagine yourself on the deck of a wooden galley at dawn. The sky above is painted in pale colors, pink, orange, and grey, blending softly as the sun rises. The sea is calm, rolling gently, its surface glimmering faintly in the morning light. The air carries the tang of salt, the faint smell of tar and rope, the ever-present dampness of the waves. Around you, sailors stir. Some coil ropes, their hands rough and calloused. Others scrub the deck with brushes, their movements steady, water sloshing across the wood. The creak of timbers, the flap of sails, and the distant cry of gulls fill the air. Life here is constant motion. The ship itself, never still, always shifting, always swaying. The sailor's day begins early, long before the sun climbs high. Tasks are divided. Some tend the sails, climbing ropes and securing knots. Others man the oars, pulling rhythmically in unison to the beat of a drum. The work is grueling, repetitive, and unending. Meals are simple: hard bread, dried fish, lentils boiled in large pots. Water, carried in barrels, must be rationed carefully. Sometimes the taste grows stale, carrying the faint sourness of long voyages. And yet, for sailors, this is life. Food not for pleasure, but for endurance. At midday, the sun beats down fiercely. There is no shade on the deck, only the faint relief of a breeze when the sails catch wind. Clothing is thin, patched, worn by salt and sun. Skin burns, lips crack, hands blister from rope and oar. Still, the rhythm continues, unbroken. The brotherhood of the crew, despite hardship, life at sea breeds a kind of brotherhood. Men sleep side by side in cramped quarters below deck, hammocks swinging with the ship's movement. They share food, water, stories, and songs. In quiet hours, some carve small figures from wood, polish weapons, or mend sails by lamplight. The sea demands cooperation, and survival depends upon trust. Among them are experienced sailors, their faces weathered by years at sea, their eyes sharp and watchful. Apprentices, often little more than boys, learn from them tying knots, climbing, rigging, cleaning decks. Their training is not in books, but in endless repetition, each mistake corrected quickly, sometimes harshly, for error on the sea can be costly. Even at sea, faith gives rhythm to life. When the time for prayer comes, sailors gather on deck, spreading mats if the weather allows. The sound of their voices rises above the waves, carried by the wind. For a moment, the sea seems to quiet, as though listening. Some voyages carry pilgrims toward Mecca, their hearts set on sacred duty. Others transport soldiers, their minds turned toward battles ahead, and others still carry goods, spices, silk, grain, linking the empire's markets across continents. But life on the water is never easy. Storms strike without warning, turning calm waves into towering walls of water. Winds howl, sails tear, the ship groans beneath the strain. Sailors lash ropes, shout commands, bail water, their lives hanging in the balance of whether they cannot control. At other times, the sea is simply endless. Day after day of horizon, water meeting sky, with no land in sight. The monotony is heavy, the silence broken only by the creak of the ship and the steady rhythm of oars. For sailors, the greatest challenge is not always danger, but endurance. When night falls, the ship grows quiet. The deck is dim, lit only by lanterns swaying gently with the movement of the waves. The stars spread vast above, brighter than in any city, endless in number, guiding sailors who know how to read them. Some men sleep in hammocks, rocked by the sea's motion. Others sit awake, watching the water, listening to the steady lap of waves against wood. The ocean at night is both vast and intimate. Infinite horizon, yet close enough to hear, to feel beneath your feet. It is here, in the rhythm of waves and the glow of stars, that sailors find a quiet kind of peace, even amid hardship. For the Ottomans, the sea was not merely a path, but a lifeline. It carried their armies, their trade, their pilgrims, and their culture. And for the sailors, it was both workplace and home. Demanding, relentless, yet also filled with moments of beauty. From the endless waters, let us now return to land. For while the sailors endured the sea, the scholars of the empire pursued knowledge in libraries and schools, shaping thought as surely as the sailors shaped sails. In our next segment, we will step into that quieter world, the world of Ottoman scholars, calligraphers, and the pursuit of knowledge. The Ottoman Empire was not only an empire of armies, palaces, and ships. It was also an empire of thought, where scholars, poets, and calligraphers shaped ideas as carefully as craftsmen shaped stone and wood. Within its mosques, madrasas, and libraries, knowledge flowed quietly, a current as steady and essential as the waters of the Bosphorus. Imagine yourself walking into a madrasa, a religious school, in Istanbul during the 16th century. The building is modest but elegant, its walls of stone warmed by the sun, its courtyard shaded by arches. In the center, a fountain trickles softly, its sound mingling with the quiet murmur of voices reciting texts. Students sit cross-legged on mats, their books resting on small wooden stands. Some whisper passages aloud, their voices blending in a low hum. Others listen as their teacher, seated before them, explains the meaning of verses from the Quran, or the logic of law, or the intricacies of grammar. The air smells faintly of ink and parchment, warmed by the sun filtering through latticed windows. Learning here is slow, deliberate, unhurried. It is built on repetition, memorization, and patience. The rhythm is steady. A verse read, repeated, explained, and then repeated again. Ottoman scholars were respected figures. They studied religion, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and law. Their authority extended beyond the classroom, into the courts and the councils of the empire. When disputes arose, it was often scholars who guided judgment, drawing upon both religious and civil law. Some became judges or cadis, serving in towns and cities across the empire. Others rose to become advisors to the Sultan himself. Their influence was quiet but deep, shaping not only personal disputes, but also policies that touched entire provinces. Knowledge was preserved not only in minds, but also in books. Libraries, often attached to mosques or schools, held shelves of carefully copied manuscripts. Imagine the feel of such a library. The soft creak of wooden shelves, the smell of old parchment, the faint flicker of lamplight on pages. Books were precious, each copied by hand, their letters flowing in graceful lines of black ink. The subjects were vast. Some volumes contained religious commentary, others works of science, maps, or histories of distant lands. To step into such a library was to feel the weight of centuries, not in noise, but in silence, in the patient presence of words. Among the most celebrated figures of Ottoman culture were the calligraphers. In their hands, writing was not simply a tool, but an art form. Each letter was shaped with precision, each stroke carrying beauty as well as meaning. Imagine a calligrapher seated at a low desk, a reed pen held carefully in hand. Beside him lies a pot of ink, its surface gleaming faintly. The page before him is smooth, prepared with care. He begins slowly, drawing letters that curve and flow, balanced in symmetry. The sound is faint, the soft scratch of pen against paper, steady, controlled, almost like a heartbeat. Calligraphy was more than decoration. It was a way of honoring the words it carried, especially the sacred verses of the Quran. It was also a discipline, requiring years of training, patience, and humility. To master it was to enter into a tradition that stretched back centuries across lands and cultures. In the Ottoman Empire, knowledge was not static. Scholars debated, questioned, and refined ideas. Astronomers observed the stars, charting their courses with instruments of brass. Physicians studied medicine, treating illness with remedies both traditional and learned from other cultures. Historians recorded the lives of rulers, the unfolding of events, preserving memory for future generations. All of this happened quietly, away from the noise of armies or markets. It was a world of stillness, of voices murmuring in classrooms, of pens scratching across parchment, of knowledge passed hand to hand, generation to generation. As the day ends, the madrasa grows quiet. Students close their books, tucking them carefully beneath arms. The teacher rises slowly, his robe brushing softly against the floor. Lamps are lit, their flames steady, casting golden pools of light across the courtyard. Outside, the call to prayer rises again, echoing through the streets. The voices of the faithful fill the air, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the quiet splash of the fountain. And in the stillness of night, the madrasa rests, holding within its walls the patient weight of knowledge. From the sea to the schools, from sailors to scholars, the empire was sustained not only by force, but also by thought. The discipline of soldiers, the grandeur of rulers, the devotion of faith, the beauty of calligraphy, all were strands woven into the fabric of Ottoman life. And yet, as with every great power, there were also shadows. The empire that seemed so vast and enduring was not unchanging. It faced challenges, internal struggles, external rivals, and the slow, inevitable currents of decline. In our next segment, we will turn to those shadows, to the fragility beneath the grandeur, and to the long arc of the empire's decline. The shadows of decline. Every empire, no matter how vast, no matter how powerful, carries within it the seeds of fragility. The Ottoman Empire, which once stretched across 3 continents, was no exception. Its golden age under Suleiman the Magnificent was followed, slowly, by centuries of strain, not in sudden collapse, but in gradual, quiet decline. Imagine standing on the walls of Istanbul in the 17th century, looking outward over a city that still bustles with life, its skyline crowned with domes. On the surface, the empire appears strong, its armies still feared, its rulers still mighty. But beneath the surface, cracks are forming. The empire is vast, too vast to be governed easily. Messages take weeks or months to travel from distant provinces back to the capital. Local governors grow powerful in their own right, sometimes bending laws to their advantage. The burden of administration stretches thin, like fabric pulled too far. The succession of sultans becomes uncertain. In earlier centuries, strong rulers like Suleiman had guided the empire with authority. But later, sultans are less involved, more secluded within the walls of the palace. Some are young, ascending the throne as children. Others are uninterested, preferring comfort to governance. This does not mean the empire collapses at once. Instead, it shifts. Power often passes into the hands of viziers, advisors, and palace officials. The harem, too, becomes a place where politics unfold quietly, shaping decisions once reserved for the throne. Authority fragments, spreading thinly across many hands. Even the Janissaries, once the disciplined core of the army, change over time. Imagine their barracks, once filled with strict routine, now softened by privilege. By the 17th century, many Janissaries hold outside trades, running shops or inns. Some resist reforms, clinging to their privileges, even rebelling against attempts to restore discipline. What was once an elite brotherhood becomes a source of unrest, its loyalty uncertain. Beyond politics, the economy strains under pressure. The empire once thrived on trade routes linking east and west, but as European powers sail new routes around Africa, the flow of wealth shifts away. Silver floods in from the New World, destabilizing coinage, driving inflation. Taxes grow heavier on farmers who already labor under difficult conditions. The countryside, which sustains the empire's wealth, feels the weight most heavily. At the edges of the empire, new rivals rise. To the east, the Safavids challenge Ottoman power. To the west, the Habsburgs and other European states strengthen, building armies and fleets that match, and sometimes surpass, Ottoman might. On the seas, the empire struggles to keep dominance, as European navies expand with new technology. Imagine an Ottoman fleet at anchor in the Mediterranean, its galleys lined with oars, its sails furled. Nearby, European ships bristle with cannon, their design more modern, their firepower greater. The balance shifts quietly, slowly but surely. For ordinary people, the decline is not always visible as politics or war. It is felt in higher taxes, in declining harvests, in uncertainty about the future. Farmers labor as always, merchants trade as always, scholars teach as always. Life continues, but with more weight, more tension, more quiet hardship. Decline is not a sudden fall. It is a long, gradual change, like the slow fading of light at dusk. For centuries after Suleiman, the empire endures, sometimes weaker, sometimes stronger, adapting, reforming, struggling. Its decline is not linear, not simple. It is a mixture of resilience and fragility, of survival and strain. Imagine again the skyline of Istanbul at twilight. The sun sets behind domes and minarets, the city glowing softly in the fading light. From the distance, nothing seems amiss. The call to prayer still rises, markets still close for the night, families still gather in courtyards and kitchens. Yet, history tells us that in these quiet evenings, the empire's strength was already fading. Not gone, but less certain. Not ended, but slowly dimming, as all great powers eventually do. The story of decline is not only about weakness, it is about endurance. An empire lasting far longer than most, shaping centuries of history even as it faced challenge after challenge. And so, as our journey nears its close, let us turn to reflection. From soldiers to scholars, from palaces to fields, from cities to seas, the Ottoman Empire was a world of contrasts, of beauty and struggle. In our final segment, we will step back and consider its legacy. What remains, what echoes still in the present, and how the past lingers quietly in our own lives today. We have walked through many worlds of the Ottoman Empire. The barracks of the Janissaries, the throne room of Suleiman, the quiet chambers of the Harem, the relics of faith, the bustling streets of the city, the slow rhythm of the countryside, the endless seas, the stillness of libraries, and finally, the long shadow of decline. Each part was different, yet all were bound together, strands in a fabric that endured for centuries. The Ottoman Empire was not only an empire of conquest or power, it was also an empire of culture, of faith, of daily lives quietly lived. It shaped art and architecture, poetry and music, law and learning. It connected peoples and lands across vast distances, weaving together stories that still echo today. Its legacy lingers not only in books or monuments, but in the rhythms of modern life. The mosques of Istanbul still rise against the skyline, their domes catching the morning sun. The call to prayer still drifts across courtyards and rooftops, just as it did centuries ago. The Grand Bazaar still hums with voices, footsteps, and the quiet exchange of goods. And in villages, in songs, in traditions, echoes of Ottoman culture still breathe quietly. Even in decline, the empire left behind more than weakness. It left behind memory of discipline, of art, of endurance, of contrasts. A reminder that history is not one thing, but many. Grand and ordinary, harsh and beautiful, fragile and enduring. Imagine, once more, standing in Istanbul at twilight. The domes and minarets glow softly in the fading light. The Bosphorus glimmers as lanterns flicker on. Voices murmur, footsteps fade. The city settles into night. And as it does, the weight of centuries seems to rest lightly in the air. Not heavy, not oppressive, but present. A reminder of lives once lived in rhythm with empire. And now, our long journey through the Ottoman Empire draws to a close. We have moved slowly through its many layers, from the lives of soldiers and rulers to the quiet struggles of villagers, from relics of faith to knowledge preserved in ink and parchment. As you rest, let these images fade gently. Let the barracks, the palaces, the markets, and the seas dissolve softly into the background of your thoughts. Hold instead only the calm rhythm of history, steady and soothing, guiding you gently towards sleep. Remember, you are here now, in comfort, in safety, in a world far removed from the uncertainties of the past. The struggles of empire belong to history, while your present belongs to rest. And to carry you further into stillness, I have placed calm, soothing music at the end of this video. Let it flow over you like a tide, steady and soft, easing you deeper into relaxation, deeper into sleep. Close your eyes, breathe slowly. Let go of the weight of the day, and drift gently, as if carried by the quiet waters of time itself, into rest. Good night.